I would like to welcome all of you to the BUCC's webinar on UKEF funding for trade and related investment into Ukraine. As many of you will know, this is part of a series of events that the BUCC has been holding on trade, starting with Ukrainian Week in London, when we gathered over 1,000 people in the Savoy Hotel and several other venues. We hope to hold another such event later this year in October, COVID permitting. I'd like to emphasize how important this development is. In my 30 years in Ukraine, there have been just a few events that have really been significant for the development of Ukraine. One was the creation of the EBRD that provided for finance of lots and lots of projects. And I believe that this UKEF facility can make the link between Britain and Ukraine, turn Ukraine into a center for project finance developments. This can really be a huge milestone for the development of Ukraine as a country. Ukraine has more serious infrastructure projects that are needed, especially in transportation, irrigation, agriculture, than any other country that I'm aware of in Europe. It's a big country that has huge potential. This UK export finance facility will help in that area of development. And it will also help in other ways. The UK right now is blocked. It can't export lots of things to the EU that it used to. Used to principally export, for example, seed potatoes to the EU. They're now totally blocked. And as a consequence of this UK export finance facility, seed potatoes from Scotland are now going to be exported to Ukraine for Ukrainian farmers. There are lots of developments in this direction that can happen. And I believe that this can also lead to a huge increase in the import of British farm equipment and other equipment for wind farms, for solar developments into Ukraine. And I hope that as more agricultural equipment is imported, the UK will be minded to take a look at increasing the tariff-free quotas for reciprocal importation of grain and poultry from these farms that should, with this new finance facility, be importing UK equipment. We will be holding some more seminars, one with DIT, in this line of seminars on how we can facilitate trade and investment into Ukraine. We'll be holding one on project finance in particular. And after this seminar, I'll be circulating letters, memoranda to all of you, articles that I've published in this area, which we're updating to take account of developments. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker to head off our webinar today, Vadym Prystaiko. The ambassador is a seasoned diplomat. He was formerly the foreign minister. He's been the Ukrainian ambassador to Canada. He was deputy head of the presidential administration. He's fluent in Ukrainian, Russian, and English. And we are really pleased to have a top-level diplomat now as our ambassador to help facilitate trade and investment. And with that, I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Mr. Tom, thank you very much. Very kind of you for the introduction. And I won't be long here. What I tried to do is very briefly to touch upon, or rather brag about our both two governments, so you would be able to concentrate on important issues like cooperation between our businesses. You rightly pointed and also almost touched all the areas of the trade and investment cooperation between Ukraine and UK. And there are just a couple of more things I would like to mention here. All of us know that business can stay, and that's what we see how business suffering here in UK, the same way business is suffering in Ukraine, but starting positions were different. So that's the good time for us to review the options and understand where we can cooperate. This is strange times when UK just left the European Union and Ukraine is just knocking at the door trying to get into. So might be something interesting here. I was making this silly joke once and again that if UK just will hold a bit and add the letter R at the end, the seat will be immediately taken by Ukraine and everybody will be able to save some money on the transition. Anyways, what we managed to do two governments is to cover three major points at the last October visit of the President Zelensky to London. And what we achieved here at the midst of turmoils of the COVID, that we signed the full-fledged agreement of strategic partnership, which even in the title have a free trade part. This is important development, especially when UK was leaving the European Union, and there was a question raised what would happen with the quota Ukraine was so much enjoying within the whole European Union quota. So we managed to preserve it and managed to transfer this quota to UK, so Ukraine has opportunity and Ukraine exports. And it is very much important for Ukraine as an export-oriented economy to enjoy the same level, or actually twice at that volume of the quotas, now being able to trade within EU and with UK separately. On top of it, and that's the major topic of our today's webinar, is 2.5 billion pounds as the UKEF support to Ukrainian projects. I have to tell you frankly that so far I'm quite frustrated that we are not seeing much in implementation of this beautiful program. And we're still lagging behind on two major parts of it, which is defense part, which we hope will be around half of this sum, and the rest of it, which was preliminary considered in the major 3-4 areas like energy, agriculture, infrastructure. And I hope that we will be able today, our conversation today will push these developments further. The third important thing I'd like to mention is the newly baked sort of promoted new position of what Prime Minister's trade envoy to Ukraine, Baroness May. I'm so happy that we have a very supporting hand of the government of UK working with Ukraine 24/7. Just to push today's conversation, I have to remind you that we have enjoyed over the years quite an considerable trade, around 2 billion, but this is not the end and we can achieve much more. UK also is third biggest investor in Ukraine's economy. And that is what's very important, Mr. Thomas mentioned it, that this is something we can and should work upon. Being able to export so much to the nation like UK, which is expected the half of the foods to be imported to the island. Ukraine, unfortunately, is responsible only of 0.1% of the import of Great Britain. Imagine such a superpower in agriculture, and with your import expectations, there's such a small amount of Ukrainian products being actually able to reach the shores of UK. So in this in mind, I hope that today's conversation will give this push, and we will find the answers on our questions. How can we expect our nations not just cooperate in political, and this is great area, but it's just a bit over our today's conversation, but how can we actually promote the business-to-business relations and the areas like IT, fintech, even space been mentioned, and we are working together with the chamber. And thank you very much, Mr. Thomas, again. Thank you.
Peter? Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. That was excellent.
Yes, thank you, mate. Sorry, I was muted there. Yes, thank you very much, Ambassador, for this introductory comments. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to our speakers and to everybody who's following online. My name is Peter Dickinson. I'm the publisher of Business Ukraine magazine and the editor of the Atlantic Council's Ukraine Alert service. I'll be moderating the rest of today's discussion. We have an excellent selection of speakers representing both Britain and Ukraine to offer a very broad view of this very interesting and very relevant issue. There's interesting new chapter in Ukrainian-British relations. So without further ado, I'd like to move on with our first speaker, Mr. Lewis Taylor, who is the CEO of the UK Export Finance and the Director General at the Department for International Trade. So, Mr. Taylor, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Peter, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. Bate, thank you very much for your introduction to the overall seminar. Really appreciate all the work that you and the Chamber put in to put this together. And also, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. I'll come to some of your comments in a moment. But it is with huge thanks to the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce that we're all here today. And I hope that it's something that will provide interest, excitement, and more to the point, the tangible results that we all want in terms of British-Ukrainian trade. I was particularly delighted to meet with His Excellency Minister of Finance, Marchenko, back in October to discuss opportunities in Ukraine when he accompanied the President to London to sign a UK-Ukraine trade deal. Already, and despite having only recently reopened for cover for Ukraine, I was really able to have a productive discussion with His Excellency on a number of new opportunities. This goes to show the fantastic level of potential and interest in Ukraine from the UK. But as His Excellency the Ambassador just said, there is some element of frustration with not having too much tangible result from all of this so far. But I would say that a lot of the projects we're talking about are potentially quite significant in size and do take some putting together and can't happen instantly, although we do try and make sure that the process for accessing UKEF support is not too onerous. I was also really delighted that our Secretary of State in the UK, Liz Truss, oversaw the signing of a UKEF Ukraine Memorandum of Understanding during last October's visit. The warm reception that this news received in the Ukrainian business community was very heartening. And if you're attending this today, it means that you've already heard the headline of our £2.5 billion available to support UK exporters and their Ukrainian buyers. And hopefully you'll now be wanting to know what this means in practice and how you can benefit from it. So I'm very proud to represent UK Export Finance as the Chief Executive. I'll give you a brief introduction to the organisation, but my colleague Rose Trigg, who's online here, will also cover how our support works, clarify misconceptions, set out the products and the eligibility criteria, things like our supplier fairs, which help to match opportunities with exporters and importers, case studies, and how to make an approach to UK export finance. So UK Export Finance is the British government's export credit agency. We're there to help fill in the gaps in finance and insurance for UK exports where the private sector can't do that. So we're not competing with the private sector finance providers, we're filling in gaps and doing things that they can't do. We do that mostly by offering guarantees to banks who will then lend the money to the buyer of British exports, in this case in Ukraine. And those guarantees, because they come from the British government, mean that the bank has what's called zero risk weighting. They treat it as a sovereign exposure against the UK government, and it means that they are more willing to lend into the transaction than if there were no British government support. So our role is to enhance the credit worthiness of the projects by giving our guarantee. I have to make sure that you understand that what we offer is not concessional finance. So we do price our financing for the risk that we take. And that's required of us by the OECD, of which the UK is a member, who set the minimum pricing that we can offer to the buyers of British goods and services. And so what we provide is access to really attractive financing, but it's not concessional. It's very competitive, but again, it's not subsidized. But access to finance is what you'll get over long maturities, which is something that the private sector often can't give. And often, if you're buying a piece of capital equipment, you will need to spread the cost of that over the life of the asset, and you will need long-dated financing to do that. That's what we can offer. We are open for pretty much any sector. And His Excellency the Ambassador mentioned a few such sectors. Let me sort of talk about some of the things that I see as being real opportunities. Certainly around agriculture, there are opportunities. Not only agriculture, aquaculture as well. So historically, we have been able to finance the export of Scottish salmon, for example, to the Ukraine. But as Bate mentioned, we're certainly looking at a seed potato opportunity, with Ukraine being fertile ground, if I can put it, for those opportunities. Infrastructure and construction, certainly another area that we would like to focus on, where we're already talking about the possibility of constructing hospitals or financing the construction of hospitals, and perhaps even bridges as well in Kyiv. In terms of renewables, we have good capability and good UK content to go into renewables industry, whether it's onshore wind, offshore wind, or even solar as well. Defence was something His Excellency mentioned. Certainly we have good capability in the UK around defence projects, and also beyond just hospitals in terms of healthcare, certainly drugs as well, where already we have been able to finance the import into Ukraine of COVID-19 testing kits from the UK, which have helped to with the track and trace effort of the government in Ukraine. So there's plenty of opportunity there, and we'd really like to focus on real opportunities rather than just to be talking about industries generally, because where we can make a real difference is when we bring finance to a specific opportunity. So with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rose Trigg, who will give you a lot more detail about how to access UK export finance and also what the products are and some of the other parameters. But once again, thank you very much to the BUCC, to His Excellency the Ambassador, and to you, Peter, as well, for hosting.
Peter?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Before we go to Rose, if I may, I would like to bring in from the Ukrainian side the Deputy Minister for the Development of the Economy, Trade and Agriculture, Mr. Oleksandr Romanishyn, who's also joining us. Give us the perspective from Kyiv, if possible. Mr. Romanishyn, are you there?
Yeah, hi everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, how are you hearing me well?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, I would just like to make also introduction from our Ukrainian side. And first of all, would like to thank everybody who organized this webinar and make this.
The minister appears to be muted. Can we unmute him?
Yeah. Are you hearing me well right now?
Seems to be muted on my screen.
I can hear him pretty well. Yeah,
it's okay. We can hear him.
Okay. Okay, guys. So yeah, again, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to those who make this webinar possible, and the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, and personally Chairman Bate Toms, and of course the Embassy of Ukraine in the UK, and personally the Ambassador Vadym Prystaiko. I provide some numbers, and the United Kingdom is Ukraine's 12th largest two-way trading partners, according to the State Statistics Service of Ukraine, accounting for 2% of total Ukrainian trade. The UK is the third largest investor in Ukraine, with an inward FDI stock of 3 billion as of the last year. Total share of UK investment into Ukraine accounted 6% in 2020. For the further development of our trade and economic relations, the profound role will definitely play the agreement on political cooperation, free trade and strategic partnership between Ukraine and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that has been signed on October October 2020 in London by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. On the same day, in October 2020, the Memorandum of Understanding was signed between the government of Ukraine and Her Majesty Secretary of State, acting through the Export Credit Guarantee Department operating as UK Export Finance. According to the memorandum, it's planned to provide financial support for the implementation of investment projects in priority areas for Ukraine as security and defense, agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and healthcare, totally up to £2.5 billion. From our side, I would like to stress that the government of Ukraine is making all efforts to improve the business environment and investment climate to ensure equal rights and opportunities for both Ukrainian and foreign entrepreneurs. In particular, in February of this year, the law of Ukraine on state support of investment projects with significant investments in Ukraine was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, and the law distinguishes a new type of investor with significant investment and investment project with significant investment that provide a number of benefits and defines form and tools for providing state support to investment project with significant investment. The law preserved status of the state institutions, which includes investment managers, and authorized by the Cabinet of Ministers to accompany investors in preparation and implementation process for the investment project with significant investment. Investment project with significant investment for which implementation state support may be provided in accordance with the law have to meet the following requirement. Explicitly, the project should be implemented on the territory of Ukraine in the certain field of processing industry. Creation up for 80 new working places with the average wages of employees at least 15% higher than the same in the region where the project is implemented. The amount of investment should exceed 20 million euros. And the last one, implementation period of the investment project should not exceed 5 years. It's the first tool. The second tools, which I would like also to mention, the law of Ukraine on industrial parks that has been adopted in 2013 and just recently amended. State regional development strategy defined a regional network of industrial parks and providing state support to entities that create such park as one of the priorities of regional development. And the main possible form of state support for creation of industrial park are as follow: financing the regional development project involving the arrangement of industrial park as well as connection of the park to external networks of engineering and transport infrastructure at the expenses of the state regional development fund, the state and local budget, setting the tax incentives of local tax rates, and import of fixed assets without payment of import duty. It's just, I have just touched only two examples of how the government of Ukraine is making efforts to facilitate the activity of foreign investors. And I suppose during our webinar, we will discuss more specifically the other side of the story, how the UK export finance helps exporters with their trade and investment in Ukraine, what types of project can be supported, and how project can be financially structured, including to support investment, etc. Thank you for your attention and have a fruitful webinar.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Now, perhaps our key speaker, if I may say so, to bring in now is the regional head for Eastern Europe, Central Asia and the Americas, so the person most directly responsible for this exciting new project with the UK Export Finance is Miss Rose Trigg. Rose, are you there? You seem to have lost Rose.
Hello, I am here. I'm just sharing my slides, so it takes a moment to switch. And I think it's decided that it can't show my video at the same time. So I've also disappeared, but I'll try and reappear at the same time. Hopefully you can all see some slides there. You should see a big ship going across the screen.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. And I'll try and start my video at the same time. Let's see if it works. Okay, brilliant. So I won't go over I won't state anything that Louis says. Undoubtedly, I'm not going to be able to be quite as eloquent as with this long experience in UKEF. So to introduce myself, as you mentioned, so I'm the regional head for business origination in the region. So I cover Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and the Americas as well. So if anyone has opportunities a little bit further away, also let me know about those. So it's a great time to be covering Ukraine at the moment. Just as I joined the department, we sort of opened up our capacities for Ukraine and had these great meetings in October. So great to now follow up with a bit more of a detailed explanation of how exactly it works and how exporters and their buyers in Ukraine can actually benefit from this. So I will skip through the introduction of who we are because Louis has already introduced us to that. But yeah, essentially we're a government department in a similar way to Department for International Trade as a department. We have our offices right here in London. And we work with we work across government and we work with the private sector to deliver our support. And also we've been named one of the best export credit agencies, in fact the best, several years in a row, recognised for our very flexible approach. And I'll talk through what that means. So there are a few things that differentiate UK export finance from other export credit agencies. Essentially, we're aiming to assure a win-win for buyers and exporters, essentially. Actually, a triple win because we're also helping the banks to get involved in projects they might not otherwise. So all export credit agencies sign up to what's called the OECD arrangement. So that means that we can finance up to 85% of an export contract. And then in terms of other ways that we work, that's really up to the export credit agencies. There are 3 or 4 main ways that we set ourselves apart in that in every project there will be an amount of local content and imported content, and we don't require a 1-to-1 ratio of UK content versus local content or other imported content, as you might see with other ACAs. We actually only ask for 20% UK content. We see that as a flexible lower limit to be accessible to start a conversation. And there, as I'll talk about later in the presentation, there are ways that we can work with you to always looking to increase that content. And that means that procurement teams enjoy working with us because it's really a procurement-led model and they can kind of shop as they see fit as long as there is that content there. And then what do we mean by the eligible content? So that's point 2 is that we can be quite flexible with how we define that. Of course, there's obviously capital goods, in construction, you're talking about the actual bricks and mortar that go into building a project, semi-finished goods, etc. But we also work with related services. So the UK might be quite strong on the project management for a certain sector or the services that go into it. And we can count that all as UK content. So in that way, we show quite a flexible approach. And then I think the third thing is when we say UK content, we mean UK content, not just UK companies. We're not nationality focused. So the support that we'd be giving could well be to a multinational that has production in the UK. So if you look at a list of names of people we've supported, they don't scream being British names, not all of them. Mitsubishi, Bechtel, Hitachi, GE. We can actually work with, as long as there is benefit to the UK economy. We can work with all different types of nationalities in terms of being the main contractor. And I think the 4th thing is that banks are a central part of this game. They provide the funding, hopefully at a more economic cost, but they would structure the transaction, lead putting together the term sheets, covenants, etc. We benefit, and the transaction would benefit from the global banking relationships that we have. And we can work with a variety of different flexible structures, and we can work with a variety of borrowers. So that the borrower for a transaction could be public or private sector. We can work with project and structured finance and PPPs. We can work in innovative ways with debt capital markets, so we can support the debt needs for investment going into a project as well. We can work with Islamic financing, for example. We're the first export credit agency to do an Islamic financing deal as well. So I think those are just some of the ways I'd like to step forward that make up our sort of value proposition. And then moving on to Ukraine specifically, as Lou mentioned, we now have a 2.5 billion capacity to support new business in Ukraine. So what that means is essentially that's the maximum amount we can make available for projects in Ukraine at any one time. And that's across all sectors. So no part of that is earmarked for specific projects or sectors. It's essentially a first come, first serve. So it is up to you essentially what types of projects you're interested in and what types of sectors you're interested in. And we will take inquiries on any sector. So ones that might be of particular interest, as we mentioned, might be around agriculture, transport and infrastructure, healthcare, energy. But really, we are open to all sectors and companies of all sizes. A lot of the support we've provided over the years and in recent years has been to small to medium enterprises as well. So next, I'm just going to go to what are the different financial products and how do we provide this support practically. So we offer a range of different products, and they can be broadly categorized in terms of what is the outcome you're trying to achieve. So I refer to them as buyer side and exporter side. So on the buyer side, we've got buyer finance, and that's all about helping UK exporters win contracts by helping their buyers in country. So these are long-term products, and they help you access more attractive credit terms when you buy from the UK, essentially. Then we have the exporter themselves. So you've won that contract, and now what you might have to scale up your operations. You may have to invest in your production capabilities. We can help directly in the form of working capital, bond support, and insurance for your export contracts. And that's especially helpful where you may not be able to find that support from the private sector. And how does that work in practice as well? So I've got a little diagram here that hopefully explains a bit of the, how the moving parts come together. So typically, you might have a UK exporter who's pursuing a contract, and they get in touch with their bank and UKEF to see whether it might be eligible for our support, or the project owner, the overseas buyer, might approach us directly, and we go via that route. What we would do is then evaluate that project, and the parties together, we decide if we can support it. We'd do that either through a guarantee, which offers, as Lou mentioned, a credit enhancement to the buyer. Essentially, we're essentially sort of lending out our status as UK government and our credit rating, or a direct loan, or a combination of the two. And quite often we'll use a combination of both the guarantee and the direct loan. So again, the bank is very important here. You can see in that flow diagram, they're the ones who will be driving forward the transaction, making the loan agreement with the borrower, structuring the transaction. So having that bank on board early is really important. And we can offer our relationships with those major banks, and also smaller, lesser heard of banks for small transactions. I'll talk about in a little bit our small deals initiative, helping those smaller ticket items sort of get over the line. So moving on to these little blue boxes here, which show our different products. I'll go into a bit of detail on each of those, but not too much, hopefully. So buyer credit is the most common way that we all support a transaction on the buyer finance side. So that's essentially the UK government becoming the guarantor on the debt from a bank. And it enhances that bank's view of the risk, because they'll draw up terms based on the UK government credit rating. And it's important to note that that guarantee is 100%. Unlike a lot of our peers, it's actually 100% guarantee. Whatever happens, that guarantee is in place for you. As we're not a company, we don't have a rating, we carry the full faith and credit of the UK government. So the benefits of that would be, of course, the exporter, they get paid upfront as if they had a cash contract, and the buyer gets time to repay over a number of years. And on the T's and C's of that, the transaction does need to be over 5 million, and the tenor needs to be at least 2 years repayment. And then we can move on to smaller ticket transactions. This is essentially very similar in terms of what the product is doing, but we may offer this for smaller transactions as well. So we have what's called our Smaller Deals Initiative, and they work with a panel of banks to identify banks that would be suitable for these smaller ticket transactions who are used to working with us, and they can offer competitive terms as well. So I would say don't let the size of a transaction put you off approaching UKEF. We can go fairly low with our sizes. Typically, the size of a UKEF deal will be around 60 million, but we can go lower. We look at sort of 1 million deals, 2 million deals, and lower than that even. I think the largest deal that we've ever underwritten was quite recently. It was monorail in Cairo, and that was around 1.2 billion. So that's the sort of range that we're looking at here. So direct lending facility. This is where we provide a loan to the UK, to the overseas buyer. And in terms of process, it's very similar in that the bank would act as an agent for that loan, but the loan is actually coming from a UK pot, and that would be offering a fixed interest rate, and that's set by the commercial interest reference rates, essentially. So that's a limited pot. We have 8 billion available for that across the world, and we actually have 2 billion ring fence, especially for clean growth projects. And so that definition of clean growth projects will be aligned with the green bond principles. So you'd be looking at obvious sectors for clean growth like renewable energy, but that also expands to sustainable water management, clean transportation, green buildings. We look at quite a wide definition of clean growth. And so spend a minute on the eligibility criteria. So, what do you need to do in order to be eligible for this, if this sounds of interest to you? So in this first bullet point, bit of legal jargon, applicants must be carrying on business in the UK. That essentially just means that the UK exporter needs to be a UK exporter. They need to export from the UK. And of course, there will be minimum risk standards. We will go through a due diligence process. As Louis mentioned, these projects take time to mature, and there will be due diligence to come with that. Of course, it needs to be satisfy the content policy around 20%, must be at least 2 years, etc. So other things you might want to consider. So as I mentioned, all OECD export credit agencies can support up to 85% of the contract value. So there will be that 15% that will need down payment. Local costs. So this is a point around, in a large project, there will be imported elements. So some of that import will be from the UK. There will also be local costs, which you might have to pay. You may be sourcing from within Ukraine. So we can actually support those costs as well, but it's limited to up to 30% of the value of the exported element, if that makes sense. It's a little bit of a mathematical equation there, but happy to talk it through. And as Lou mentioned, we do charge a premium for the risk that we take. And what you can do to have an idea of what that might be is we have a premium risk calculator online. I can share the link with you if you like, and that shows you just for a sovereign transaction. So if the borrower was the government, you can have a look at what the premiums set by the OECD would be. So that's a one-off upfront payment. It's separate from the interest charged on the loan. It can be paid up front or financed from the loan. So you can imagine it being annuitized over the length of your loan. And a brief word on the kind of tenors that we offer. 10 years would be typical for a long-term project. We can go up to 18 years for water, renewable energy and nuclear, and around 14 years for rail and project finance. But these would of course be specific to each project, and we look at it on a case-by-case basis, looking at the details of your project. So next up, Louis did mention, we would talk a little bit about the fly affairs. So you might have a project in mind that you're thinking of, and you've approached us about it, and we think that there's potential there. We want to work with you on it. but perhaps you need a little bit of help reaching that UK content requirement. Maybe you need help increasing it from that. As we say, we'd always look to increase the UK content. To share with you, you know, the average for the UK content of the deals that we would underwrite would be around 40%. So we're always looking to increase that. So one way that we can do that is organise matchmaking events. These would take place, you know, if they're in person one day, but if we're doing them online, maybe that's a little bit much and you want to spread it over 2 days. And we would work with the Department for International Trade and trade associations, and we would handpick a group of exporters to present to you essentially, and you would present your project to them and have one-to-one meetings with suppliers and find out what the UK supply chain can add to this project. And then I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on the other part of the business around guarantees to exporters. I'm aware that I can't see you all, but I'm sure that there is around 50-50 a Ukrainian and UK audience here. So if you're a UK exporter yourself and you're thinking you've got some big orders coming in and you're going to need some support with them, we can guarantee up to 80% of various facilities that are provided to exporter by a bank. So broadly, there will be shades of the same thing, these products here. So we have bond support scheme and export working capital scheme. So that can support you with your bonds and your working capital, obviously. There's no minimum or maximum value for that, and it would be tied to a specific export contract. We then have some new products, and we have the general export facility. And that's actually non-contract specific. So that could be if you're an exporter exporting around the world and you want to scale up your facilities, etc. You can use the GEF. That would be typically used for up to 25 million. We also have export development guarantee, and that's very similar. However, that can go above 25 million. And that's when we're looking at really sort of much larger values there. And we can also offer insurance policies. So where you might not be able to find insurance from the private sector, we can offer insurance on your bonds and export insurance. And so I just want to run through some case studies of how this has worked in the past. So while we're on the topic of support directly to exporters, we did provide an export development guarantee of £500 million to Jaguar Land Rover. And because our statute allows us not just to support exports, but activities that are conducive to exports, we're able to use this to cover 80% of a facility from a bank to support Jaguar Land Rover's investment into research and development for their next generation electric vehicles, which Jaguar Land Rover are the UK's biggest automotive exporter, so that supports their abilities then to export around the world. And some examples on the buyer financing side. So this is the guarantees and loans to overseas buyers. So for example, we guaranteed 5.7 million loan to the Georgian Ministry of Agriculture, and that allowed them to buy combine harvesters and tractors from CNH. And that they used the most advanced technology, and they were able to get their 6-year financing package from a bank for that. And then I think this is it's really good that you mentioned around space technology, because this is a sector that we've worked in close to the region. We supported a 325 million loan to the Turkish government, and that allowed Airbus UK. They were able to manufacture and deliver. They actually delivered them in orbit to telecom satellites. And that helped with Turkey and the wider region's provision of TV and data services. And a large part of what we do will look at construction of major projects. So it doesn't get much more major than this 17,000-seater entertainment and sports venue, the Dubai Arena, that actually opened in 2019. We supported it with almost 220 million of support in the form of that used both buyer credit, so the guarantee, and direct lending to combine to create that overall figure. And we provided the support to the project sponsor, and that supported a contract with the Kyiv group. And then I also want to mention briefly around renewable energy. This is renewable energy and clean growth, as we mentioned, with that extra. With that 2 billion ring-fence pot for clean growth is an area that we are really focusing on and would really like to work on around the world. So So one of our major projects was 2 major offshore wind projects in Taiwan, and the combined support we provided for that was 300 million. And in that case, that's an example of where we supported the lead contractor, who was not a UK entity. So that was a foreign lead contractor, and they were subcontracting with the UK, and we were able to support that on the basis of that UK content. So that's what I mean when I say that when we say UK content, we mean UK content, not just UK companies. So if this all sounds good, then this is how you get in touch with us. So we do have an inbox that you can email. You can, of course, email me directly. So I would be the one who would be looking at new transactions on the buyer side. So you come through to my team who are looking after the region. And we're very happy to have an initial conversation about any projects you might have that you think would be of interest for us. You know, our job is to talk with you and have that first conversation. And when we start discussing that, the sort of checklist of information we'd be looking for will be around the scope of the project, major stakeholders, what that UK content might be, what's your indicative financing plan, and how long are you looking to borrow for, etc. So we might not need that all up front, but that's the sort of thing that we would start looking for when we have that first conversation. And then if you're looking for support on the directly to exporters, so what we're talking around working capital and bonds, you can actually get in touch directly with your regional export finance manager. And there's a link there where you can find who your regional EFM is, and they can talk you through the steps for applying for support as an exporter as well. So thank you, everyone. I'm aware that I've had the longest sort of talk here, and it's also been the most detailed on financial products. So if you've stuck with me to the end, then thank you. I think this is a really great time to be working together on projects, and I look forward to hearing from those in the audience about opportunities you might have in the region. So I think I'll pass over now and take more questions at the end. Please do feel free to ask any question. If you've not worked with an export credit agency before, some of this might be unfamiliar. There are no stupid questions.
Thank you very much, Rose, for that comprehensive overview. Very helpful and comprehensive overview. A word about the procedure. We will be having a question and answer session after all of our speakers have given their introductory presentation. So I encourage any viewers who have issues to send your questions in. We will try to get them, and of course you're welcome also to address our speakers independently outside of this forum. I'd now like to bring in the British Embassy in Kyiv. We're joined by Peter Wickenden, who's the first secretary of the embassy in Kyiv and also the acting country director for the Department of International Trade. Peter, please.
Thank you, Peter. For the benefit of both Ukrainian companies and British companies and Ukrainian officials, government departments that might be in our audience this afternoon, I thought it would be useful if I start by setting out what exactly my team in the Department of International Trade in the British Embassy in Kyiv does and does not do. So essentially our main job is to promote exports of British goods and services to Ukraine. We don't promote or facilitate trade in the other direction. That is Ukraine exports to the UK. We think that is the job rightly of the Ukrainian government. Nor do we promote British companies investing into Ukraine as such. Again, we think that is the job of Ukraine Invest. If we are asked for advice about the investment environment in Ukraine, then we certainly will give it, warts and all, to any British companies that need it. But we neither encourage nor discourage British investment into Ukraine. We do, however, support British companies which have already invested in Ukraine, which may run into problems or difficulties with the authorities, whether it's tax issues or regulatory issues, and so on. We support them as and when we can, within the bounds of the fact that we can't necessarily interfere in the judicial processes of Ukraine, where court cases or litigation is involved. We do, however, promote or try to attract Ukrainian investment into the UK. And I think we have taken part today, Jock Mendoza-Wilson, who represents one of the existing major investors in the UK, Metinvest. And we hope that you will continue to stay in the UK and develop and thrive. And we, again, it's our job to make sure that you have all the support you need in your business in the UK. So what we're talking about here today is UK export finance, and that is all related to potential exports of British goods and services. It's not so much sort of supporting in some way investments per se into Ukraine. There has to be some involvement of British goods and services being sold to Ukraine. You might be interested to know what the UK is selling to Ukraine at the moment. It's incredibly varied. People ask me that question, and my answer is usually something like everything from biscuits to aircraft. It's extremely varied. I think there is also a notion that these days the UK does not make anything anymore, but that is completely untrue. We are the 9th biggest manufacturing country in the world. And we are still world leaders particularly in advanced manufacturing, advanced engineering, aerospace, automotive, rail engineering, transport in general, advanced materials, pharmaceuticals, and many other sectors. I would like to see exports of everything from biscuits to aircraft to satellites to increase in Ukraine. I'd like to see more lovely British cars on the road, motorcycles too, for that matter. But given that I've only got a team of 5 excellent staff here in the embassy, we can't do everything, so we have to prioritize a small, limited number of sectors. And the ones that we focus on at the moment are renewable energy, green and low carbon technology, electric vehicles, offshore wind. There's potential I see in the government's interesting plans to develop hydrogen in Ukraine. The civil nuclear sector is also a sector where the UK has many, many decades of experience. We have the world's first nuclear power plants, and we are heavily involved in assisting Ukraine with continuing to deal with the Chernobyl zone and maintaining the life and extending the life of the other operating nuclear power stations in Ukraine and improving their output and their efficiency. There's a lot of scope for that. So that's a huge sector of British industry and expertise. There is the whole defence and security sector, and as the ambassador and others have mentioned already, there is already a programme where the UK will be assisting in the renewal or rebuilding of Ukraine's navy and its naval port infrastructure. But there is also plenty of scope for collaboration in both equipment for the Ukrainian army and the Air Force, and in civil aerospace as well. We are quite interested in the plans for companies like Antonov to restart their various civil aircraft programs, which have been on hold for a while, and in which a number of UK companies are already involved, supplying various parts and components such as avionics, wheels, and so on. Mining is another sector where the UK has a huge amount of experience and equipment to offer. Although I think our UK export finance speakers said that in principle, all sectors are open to assistance from UK export finance. I think it might be the case that it's less easy for any part of the UK government, including Department of International Trade these days, to support new projects overseas involving coal, oil and gas. That's part of a new policy announced by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson in December in respect of oil and gas. Agricultural technology is obviously a huge opportunity in Ukraine as such a massive agricultural producer. Tech in all of its forms, whether it's agri-tech or financial technology, medical technology, educational technology, the Internet of Things. You know, that's your fridge talking to your local supermarket, telling it that you're running out of milk. Artificial intelligence, gaming, and so on. That's another area where the UK is highly advanced. Those are the main priority sectors that we focus on. But of course, there are plenty of other things where we will respond on a more reactive basis if we see interest and demand from you, the Ukrainian buyers. And so I would very much like to take this opportunity to promote British world-leading expertise in infrastructure, in architectural design, railway engineering, advanced engineering of all sorts, marine engineering, shipbuilding, ship design, and many other things. Before I get completely carried away, I better stop there. But I hope that gives you some sort of a flavour of the Britain's capability and the breadth and the extent of it. And there are certainly no limits to our enthusiasm to work with you and to respond to any inquiries which you may have. If you are interested in finding out what Britain has to offer, you want to import something from the UK, I'm all ears and I would be very excited to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that introduction from the embassy side. Now, our previous speaker, Peter, mentioned there Ukraine Invest, the Ukrainian government's investment agency. Now we are joined by the CEO of Ukraine Invest, Sergei Tsivkach. Sergei, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please, can you offer your view on the opportunities this new cooperation with the Ukraine creates for Ukrainian businesses, perhaps, and for British businesses in Ukraine?
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you to all organizers. Thank you for setting up this excellent event. It's a great honor to be here today and to talk about opportunities. I will speak briefly about what's happening in Ukraine, what we do, and how we see cooperation with UKEF possible. So investment climate in Ukraine, it's not a secret to everyone that Ukraine, as all other countries worldwide, is in quite a trouble right now. More than 170 countries worldwide were faced last year with negative GDP growth. That's a quite significant number. So according to international institutions, economic crisis linked to pandemic was the biggest since Second World War, and so on and so on. So in these conditions, countries, they need to become more competitive, and they do become more competitive. And Ukraine is not an exclusion here. So we were faced with same economic issues, as I said, but we are making progress in terms of investment climate and in terms of tools that are now available and will become even more available to investors soon. So we have done reform in our PPP sector. So new concessions were signed last year, which was quite promising. So one of the biggest concessions was signed with Q terminals. It was a seaport concession. We expect new concession agreements to be signed in this year and the following year. And we saw development of value-added manufacturing facilities in Ukraine. Only last year, companies set up investment projects in Ukraine with total value of $500 million. I'm not saying that $500 million were invested last year. I'm saying that they were started, and this money will be invested within next couple of years. But going to incentives that Ukrainian government and state as such provides to investors, we now have a new tool, and Deputy Minister of Economy have mentioned this law. It's law on investment incentives for significant investment projects. So I will not be repeating details about the law. What I need to say is that Ukraine Invest, our institution, was authorized to become a responsible agency to provide consultancy to foreign investors and local investors in accordance with this law. So what we will be doing, we will be providing consultancy, we will be helping investors to go through procedure and to obtain state support in form of connection to grids, tax relief, custom duties relief, communications connections, and so on. But how do we see cooperation with UKEF? The line of finance of 2.5 billion pounds is a significant achievement, and I would like to thank you on my behalf, on behalf of Ukraine, to British government, to Kyiv, for opening this facility. But now we need to create preconditions, for this facility to be used, because our economy needs investment, and this line is open up for now. So what we can do, we have analyzed Ukraine Invest supply chains that were changed during pandemic. And as you know, now in European Union and among all OECD countries, there is a concept of second Asia right now. So what that means? That means the supply chains are shortening. And therefore, Ukraine is once again on at least regional agenda, and we can become that manufacturing hub. So what we have seen that European Union annually buys goods from Asian region for 1.2 trillion US dollars. It's a huge amount of goods that is supplied from Asia and shipped to European Union. And it takes up to 47 days for those goods to be shipped to EU. Also, we have looked at UK experience in terms of cooperation with Asia, and we can see that supply of goods from Asia to UK is steadily growing. So when we talk about 2018, for example, UK have purchased goods from Asia for 144 billion US dollars. In 2019, that figure rose to 152 billion dollars. And in 2020, figure have reached 164 billion US dollars. That means that we have strong potential to cooperate with UK and relocate facilities, some facilities to Ukraine. We have analyzed at least 7 to 10 product lines that can be produced in Ukraine, bearing in mind our experience, our skills of our workers, territorial location, and so on. So we are very interested, and we will be cooperating with our businesses and international investors, and we'll be promoting tools that UKEF can provide as well in order to relocate manufacturing facilities to Ukraine, because that will bring more stability to the region. We will be able to use your funds in order to promote manufacturing facilities in Ukraine. And also there will be development of regional economic scope. So we will be talking to all stakeholders and providing information about your facilities and what can be done in Ukraine. We'll be ready to go out with that strategy in about 2 weeks' time. and make it public. So that's one opportunity that we can see as cooperation strategy between Ukraine and UK and UKEF. Also, we have presented joint material with a Ukrainian State Subsoil and Geology Survey. We have presented 30 projects in mining sector. The total amount of investments required for these 30 projects is about $10 billion. So I can see huge potential there as well for cooperation with UK Export Finance. We understand that UKEF works in kind of key 4 areas, that's healthcare, energy, agriculture, and infrastructure. In terms of energy, we know that there is interest of current investors that invested and planning still to invest in alternative sources of energy in Ukraine to cooperate with UKEF. We will be providing them support in Ukraine in order to make possible, for that to be happening. We just had last week a couple of productive meetings, but also we are working on development of PPP approach in healthcare sector. So Ukraine Invest currently working on a project that will make possible, hopefully, within some reasonable time, concessions in healthcare sector. We are looking at Turkish experience, we are looking at experience of other countries, and we are making that benchmarking, how to adjust our regulatory environment in order to make those concessions possible. So we will be interested to explore these opportunities with UKEF as well. And just to summarize about Ukraine Invest. So Ukraine Invest is a state authority. We are a governmental office responsible for attraction and support of investments in Ukraine. So we will be providing information to our partners in UKEF about our pipeline. And our pipeline of investment projects consists of 34 projects, and the total amount of investment is it's about $4.4 billion at the moment. So we will be analyzing tools that are provided by UKEF, presenting them to investors that are already planning to invest in Ukraine, and we hope that there will be a good synergy as well. So just to summarize, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Ukraine Invest is working on opportunities that may be useful for our international partners and UKEF specifically. And we remain your, reliable partner in Ukraine in order to make connections, in order to promote your product in Ukraine, and in order to make those projects happen and provide proper aftercare support. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent speech. Peter? Well, let's move on to our next speaker, and that is Jock Mendoza-Wilson. Jock is the representative of Systems Capital Management, including for some of the investments in the UK that were recently referred to. Jock, would you like to begin?
Hi, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the Director of International, well, for those who don't know me, I'm the Director of International Investor Relations for System Capital Management, which is Ukraine's largest financial group. And it's the business group that represents the assets of the Ukrainian businessman Rinat Akhmetov. And yep, we are a significant investor in the United Kingdom. The UK is indeed, for our business, a crucial country. We have a steel rolling mill in the north of the United Kingdom in Gateshead, which is owned by Metinvest, and that's fully integrated into our Azov steel plant in Mariupol. So steel plates from Mariupol are shipped over to the United Kingdom to Gateshead, where value is added in Gateshead, and then they're sold to the UK manufacturing sector and indeed re-exported either to the European Union or abroad. But it's not just in the metal sector that we're invested in the United Kingdom. We also have our SCM advisory business in the UK. That's a tech fund investing in many UK tech-orientated businesses. And the UK is a marvelous home for technology investment and for investment, particularly in financial technology. And we announced at the end of last year that our energy business, DTEC, is setting up an energy investment hub based in the City of London. And that's part of our ambitious expansion plans at DTEC to expand our renewables business into other parts of Europe, as well as draw on the investment resources of the City of London to be able to power the investment in renewable energy in Ukraine. And so, from our point of view, this new political free trade and strategic partnership agreement signed in October was a really good sign for us that there was a strong platform that had political support and real policy support to improve trade between our two countries. And it was a crucial time for the United Kingdom as it moved towards Brexit. And it's an important time for Ukraine while it seeks to reinvest in its industrial heritage, but also transform the country through investment. Now, I want to draw attention here and look at the energy sector in particular. This year is a very important year for the United Kingdom and for Ukraine in terms of renewables. The United Kingdom, as many of you may know, will host in Glasgow at the end of this year the UN-led COP26 discussions over climate change. And the UK, we feel, is taking a strong lead in this and attempting to pull in increased investment into the renewable sector to be able to drive that change to a low carbon future. Now here at DTEC is the largest single producer of renewable energies in Ukraine, and we see the new agreement that's been signed as an opportunity to deploy the latest United Kingdom-based technology and expertise in wind power and in solar, which were referred to by presenters earlier, and have that technology in Ukraine. In doing so, one of the crucial aspects that we've heard, if you like, from experts, and this is the view from business, what we see in this agreement is the possibility of having access to greater access to capital. I think in the presentation given by Rose, it was very clear that what does this do? It reduces the risks for banks and capital goods providers to provide the latest technology to countries, in this case, Ukraine. And we see clearly the benefit of that. If you're investing, as we have, over $2 billion in the renewable sector, then you're going to have good access to capital. Wherever you have the opportunity to reduce the risk for the borrower, then you have the opportunity to increase business and trade. And that's where we see this particular agreement being of great importance to SCM Group and to DTEC in particular. I also want to mention our agricultural business, Harvest, that can certainly benefit from the UK's exceptional expertise in agricultural productivity, including in both machinery and in agri-science. So we see this agreement as creating an opportunity to create a multiplier effect in the access to capital for Ukrainian businesses, and in so doing, help the Ukrainian economy move quickly, but at the same time, clearly, as Peter clearly outlined, the interests from the United Kingdom are selling more things to more people. And I'm British as well as working in Ukraine. So, amen to that. And that is the benefit of any good relationship, is an ability to have both parties benefit from the deal. And what is important for Ukrainian business in this context is, as you can see from the requirements from UK Export Finance, it's very important that Ukrainian businesses get in line their corporate governance and their financial management to ensure that they can benefit from this opportunity. And by so doing, it also helps drive the reform agenda, making business cleaner, smarter, more efficient, and, might I say, tackling corruption. I know we want to have time for questions, and we've only got 15 minutes left, so I think I will draw to a conclusion and probably say that, I think this facility that we've heard about today is a great benefit to the Ukrainian economy as well as the United Kingdom economy, and it underpins what I see and hope will be the ambitious plans for growth of trade between the two countries. And it creates an accessible financial instrument for Ukrainian business that can help underline the transformation of their capital investment in goods, and also, where necessary, in buying expertise and services, as was outlined in the earlier presentation, particularly for UK exporters who, I know what it's like speaking to UK businesses about investing in Ukraine. They're worried always about risk. And the key aspect of this export finance initiative from the UK is that it really cuts exporters' risks, and it cuts the risk also for providers of finance. And in so doing, it has a big multiplier effect on trade. And that's the last of my comments on that. And I'm going to put my other hat on for a second before I hand back to Peter. I'm also the deputy chair of the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce. So, we're all in business here, many of us. So I have to say to you, it's a tough time for chambers like this, putting on events like this at cost. This doesn't come free. We have to invest in this, which we're happy to do. But we would ask you, if you find these sort of things of benefit, please sign up and be members. We need that money coming in as well. And to let you know, there'll be more of these online events, but also as vaccines roll out in our two countries, we'll soon, we hope, be able to hold physical events. And clearly, if you're a member, you're first on the invitation list. You have the opportunity to ask questions. You may even get the opportunity to speak. So think about it. It's a very small amount of money relatively to invest in a helpful future of trade between our two countries. And with that last small commercial and demand for money without menaces, I will hand back to Peter, who's going to handle the questions. Peter.
Jock, thank you very much. I think that was a very, very reasonable request as well, and I second your comments about the importance of supporting the BUCC and other chambers that are doing this very important work, especially now, at all times, but especially now. So thank you to all our speakers for the very, very informative overview of the situation of this new developments in UK-Ukrainian relations. Now we've had a very active dialogue going on online as well throughout the discussion with a number of questions. I'd just like to dip into some of them. Before I do so, can I just check? Do we still have our colleagues from UKEF with us? Do we have Rose and Lewis with us, or have they left the call?
I'm here. Yes, it says the host has blocked my video, so you've decided that I don't look good enough for this call.
Could we unblock Rose's video, please? Is that possible?
Yes. Sorry for that. I sent you a request.
Because I imagine most of the questions we have will probably be for you, Rose. Okay.
Yes,
So
very active.
if I may begin, first of all, Miroslav Yavorenko asks whether UK-Ukraine joint ventures are covered by the export credit support facility. And he specifically mentions...
Yes, so we can support...
So would that be something that will be covered, joint ventures?
Yes, so we can cover joint ventures. It will boil down to there being an export contract and an export there. So we will dig down into where is the export in this joint venture and how can we support that as our laser focus there. So sometimes, a joint venture will approach us and we'll find that, there actually isn't something that could qualify as an export there. But I would say approach us and we can review it. As in the presentation, there's that list of information that we need, and that would apply for joint venture as well.
Thank you. Now, a number of the questions that we've received refer to the issue of creditworthiness and the borrower's good standing. I think a number of our commentators have asked for a little bit more clarification on how that is calculated. They ask, is it on a case-by-case basis? Are there any specific set rules that they could perhaps refer to?
Yes, so essentially what will happen, 3 different things depending on what type of deal is coming to us. So if it is the borrower is a company, corporate, maybe that company already has an external credit rating, in which case we would look at that. But quite often, by the nature of this, they won't have an external credit rating. So we will do our own internal assessment, and we will use as a starter, we'd ask for 3 years audited financial accounts in English to international standards. And we would look at, the standard things you might look at when you're looking at someone's financial rate. You'd be looking at, their, profits and loss, etc. And we'd go into that sort of detail there. Another thing, so if that is an issue, then there are ways that we can kind of work around this, around use of guarantees. Guarantees from parent companies, or if it's a corporate and they're having a guarantee from another organisation that has a better credit rating, we can look at ways to mitigate any sort of concerns we might be having around a company. If it is a sovereign transaction, so it's the government is wanting to borrow, make a loan, we would look at their sovereign rating. So we have sovereign ratings for all different countries, and you can find these online. On our sovereign premium risk calculator. You can get a general idea of what the parameters might be. And then if it is a project finance, so someone's coming to us, they've set up a special purpose vehicle, they've put equity into a project and they're looking for us to support the debt on it, and actually there isn't a balance sheet to look at, we would we'd go down the project finance route of assessing what the income flows from that project would be, and that's more of an intensive process, of course, because you're then looking at how likely it is that this project is going to be earning enough money to repay its debt, essentially. And in that case as well, guarantees can also be used from external sources to enhance the credibility of that project. We tend to be not keen on taking pure project risks, so we will usually look to mitigate that with use of guarantees, either from the government who says, yes, we're going to, buy the offtake of this product, or if it's a energy project, we'd be looking at the offtake agreement that comes out of that. I hope that's helpful. Any other questions on that? Happy to expand.
Yeah, no, I think a number of people have commented on this. I think there's clearly interest in the eligibility issue. But I would suggest also they can refer to the online information as well that I assume will be made available after this presentation.
Can I add something,
yes,
Peter?
Please do, yes.
Yes, just check with you, Rose. Actually, I think it is correct to say that in some cases, perhaps involving things like mining projects, UK Export Finance also may need to do due diligence about environmental aspects, environmental impact, sometimes even sort of human rights related due diligence. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is. So that would be separate to sort of the credit analysis of the borrower, but that would be related to the project as a whole. And in every project, we would do environmental and social due diligence and ethical due diligence as well. So that would apply to, whether it was a mining project or whether it was a hospital, we'd check what the impact on the local environment is going to be.
I see. Okay, we have a specific question from Oleksandr Markus, who's our colleague from the German-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry here in Kyiv. There's another member of the international business community here in Ukraine. And Oleksandr asks about the eligibility for hydrogen manufacturing and processing facilities, an energy-related subject. Is this something that's covered?
Yeah, so hydrogen, of course, is an up-and-coming industry, an exciting sort of area to get into. We are keen to be able to support hydrogen exports. Of course, it's in very early stage of, the technology is being prepared, so we will need to sort of get comfortable with the technology. But yes, essentially, we would be interested in looking at hydrogen. We do have not currently sort of closed deals, but we are progressing quite far with deals that have hydrogen elements to them. Quite often you'll see a renewable energy project that has a hydrogen element to it. So yes, we would be interested in that.
Qualifies, okay, interesting. And Christian Anderson asks, who's presumably Danish, asks about existing experience with UKEF and Ukraine prior to the 2.5, the current 2.5 billion export credit support. Is there any existing experience? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What the lessons you've learned so far, if there has been anything at this point? Perhaps Peter and Rose could respond to that.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a blank canvas, to be honest. So we didn't provide cover until recently. I can't remember when the last time we did provide cover. There was a point that we did, and then we stopped. So all of that current capacity is available, bar about, I think, about 5 million that's probably been provided on support directly to exporters. So yeah, it's a blank canvas for new buyer finance in the region, and we're in learning mode. We're learning more about the market, and first on my priority list for when we can travel, be to travel out to Ukraine and meet people in the business community and learn some more. But yeah, in terms of lessons learned, we'll be learning from lessons in other parts of the region where we have been working and building up our experience in Ukraine.
And where else in the region have you been most active at this point, up to this stage?
Up to this stage, so we count Turkey as part of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So Turkey is somewhere we have a international representative there. So we have a network of 13 people around the world, and they cover regions. And so our representative for ECAN is called Oscar, and he's based in Istanbul, and he covers the wider region from Ukraine all the way to Central Asia.
Thank you. Just looking at the questions again here, one moment. Another issue that's been raised by a couple of people who've sent in questions has been about the possibilities to find partners in the UK if they have ideas that they think would potentially be of interest to develop. And you mentioned this in your presentation earlier, Rose. Could you say a few more words about that, perhaps? Any opportunities to match make between businesses?
I think perhaps if you don't have a specific project that you're looking for UKEF support, I think this would be maybe one for DIT, Peter. Would that be something on your end? So we would do the matchmaking at a point when we've looked at a project itself, and we'd be matchmaking on the project. But in terms of making individual links, I think that would be a DIT realm.
Peter?
Yes, that's right. Absolutely, Rose. So I've put my email address in the chat there, peter.wickenden@fcdo.gov.uk. Yes, I'm very open to any suggestions or ideas that any Ukrainian company might have. If there is specific technologies that you're interested in or know-how, or you'd like to collaborate possibly with joint manufacturing or technology transfer or manufacturing of maybe British products under license, that sort of thing, then do by all means send me an email, and we can see what British companies might have the technologies or the products that you are looking for and might be interested in collaborating with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I think on that rather constructive note, I think it makes sense to thank all of our participants. I would like to invite the BUCC chairman, Bate Toms, to offer his final commentary. And I would say from my side, thank you very much to everyone. It's been very interesting, informative, pleasure to join you. So, Mr. Toms, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. First, I'd like to make one comment question. People can react if they want. It's been mentioned several times that investment can't be financed, but we've also seen, I've been particularly struck by how UKEF is very flexible, very sophisticated in what they can finance. So I think for most people like me, a lawyer structuring investments, probably any investment can be structured in part as a UKEF financing. As, for example, as exports being used to capitalize a company effectively for their business in Ukraine, which we're doing now with one of our clients, with UKEF. If anyone has a comment on that, I don't want people to go away and think, well, we're investing, so it doesn't help us so much. It can very much help investors. So unless someone has a comment to that, I'd like to begin by thanking all of our speakers. You've all been excellent. This has been a terrific presentation. You will all receive our cufflinks. Our British-Ukrainian cufflinks are joined UK and Ukrainian flags. They've been our gift to our speakers for the past several decades, and I hope you'll enjoy those. I also want to thank our organizers for our chamber, Maria Atamanuk and Anna Maria Lazarovich. Both have put in countless hours trying to reach everybody and be sure that everything was organized technically. And to Peter Dickinson. Peter, thank you very much. You're just a terrific host for events like this. And finally, if any of you have further questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. And for members, we're happy to do some analysis and help you develop questions and develop ideas for questions. So just let us know. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.